Greetings, this is Lama Tantrapa, and I want to welcome you to another masterclass of my training program that I'm offering to you as an opportunity to dive deeper into the principles of high performance, and also as the stepping stone that may lead you to dive into the deep dive course on high performance that I'm going to be unrolling later this month. Today, I'd like to share with you some of the interesting principles and also applications of high performance. But before I do that, let me just remind you that last week I shared with you another masterclass in which we covered such topics as the reasons why we want to perform at a high level, what's the difference between peak performance versus high performance, also what are the blockages that stop us from performing at a high level on a consistent basis. And we also recognize that there are certain principles that can help us perform at a much better level if we just simply observe these principles and stay on track. So today I'm going to dive right into these principles and also address some of the misconceptions that people have about high performance. First of all, the definition of high performance implies that we learn how to perform at a higher level than the average person. Obviously, then you would need to be some sort of measurement or assessment of your level of performance. And if you have that kind of a assessment method or way to test yourself, then it makes it easy for you to know whether or not you're performing at a high level. If you don't, there is another interesting way to look at it. I often refer to high performance as the art of being at the right place at the right time. How do you get to be at the right place at the right time? Well, most people would say it's just a matter of luck. If you're lucky, you will be able to get there in time, or you will find yourself at the right place at the most opportune moment. However, I also believe that luck is not just a matter of hoping that it's going to happen to you. It's much more a matter of getting to the right place, understanding when the right time might be to be there, and also doing the right thing once you get there. So it's not enough to be on the right track, you also need to be moving in the right direction, so to speak. And how do you get to the right place? And how do you know that the place is right? Well, in our previous master class, we discussed a simple and elegant understanding that everything is made of energy in our universe. That includes places, which means if a certain place is made of energy, you can actually feel whether or not you're resonating with the energy of that place. I'm sure you have experienced it to some extent in various moments in your life. Perhaps you were looking for a place to live, and obviously you were hoping to find a place that would be suitable for you to live in, and also that you would feel good about being in it. Now, how do you know that you found that place? You can have a certain list of criteria that you want to check. For example, the place that is conveniently accessible, or perhaps located at a good neighborhood, or perhaps has certain amenities that you're looking for. However, it all boils down to energy. Those amenities are made of energy. The good neighborhoods are made of energy. They're energy fields that surround that particular locale. And so what happens when you find the right place, you feel differently from the feelings you have when you are at different places. How do you know that you feel differently? Do you get excited? Maybe. Do you get exuberant or have a tremendous amount of energy? Maybe. Maybe you just feel really confident. That's a possibility. But one feeling is what we're really looking for. The mind can play all kinds of tricks on us. We may also have certain associations with various places in our lives that we've lived in or that have been experienced in the past. Perhaps there are certain hopes of finding the place that matches certain expectations. And if we find a place that resembles what we expected to find, that certainly is going to be exciting to us. The mind plays all kinds of tricks, but the body doesn't lie. And so what we'll learn is how to pay attention to the physical body. In particular, we are looking for the level of tension. Now, we're not looking for increasing tension, we're looking for decreasing tension. We basically become more relaxed when we find a greater sense of resonance when it comes to a particular place or anything else. For instance, if you find a place that you really resonate with, just check your breathing. If you're breathing deeper and smoother, you may have a sigh of relief. Essentially, you find yourself at a place where your body stops being tense. And the body, by the way, doesn't tense up on its own accord. It actually needs to receive signals from the central nervous system, telling it to tense up. So if the central nervous system is agitated, that means the body will be following suit. If the central nervous system is becoming less agitated, in other words, your unconscious mind recognizes that you are in the right place, you actually become more relaxed. Simple as that. Where else can this apply? For example, you may be at a gathering, at some party or a convention of some sort. There's going to be a number of people that you run into. Some of them you may resonate with more, some of them you may not resonate with so much. It's not black and white. It's always different degrees of resonance. So it's on the scale of resonance from 0, where there is no resonance, to 100%. But in most cases, and most people don't fall under the 0 or 100% categories. They're somewhere in the middle. The bell curve, so to speak, is happening. So the majority of places that you can assess resonance with, the majority of people you encounter are not perfectly in resonance or completely in dissonance with you. They're somewhere on the scale. And so what we learn is how to develop the ability to assess that level of resonance, because everything is relative. So you essentially learn how to assess resonance in comparison to something else. For example, if you're shopping for a car, you're not going to buy a car, the first car that you see on the car lot. If you're shopping for a place to live, probably you're not going to buy the first house that you see on the market. If you want to establish an intimate relationship, you're not going to get married to the first person you meet, hopefully. So if you are at a convention or at a party, you probably are going to have a chat with a number of people. And consciously or unconsciously, you will feel greater sense of connection and rapport, or not so much. Now, how would you know that you established a rapport with someone? One of the ways to recognize that is by simply noticing how much more relaxed you are in the company of a certain person. If the person makes you cringe, if you feel tense in the person's company, that is not a sign of rapport. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite of that. I would say it's a sign of a relatively poor degree of resonance. Now, if there are no other people in the entire group whom you resonate better with, maybe that is the person that actually is worth spending time with, because all the other options are worse. So if you recognize that everything is relative, then you also realize that you're not always looking for the top top resonance ultimately, but for the top resonance among the given options. So in other words, you make a choice based on energy resonance, and that is the most intelligent way to make choices in your life. The intelligent way to make choices is not based on certain features or certain criteria. It's based on the sense of energy resonance. For example, you probably have some music in your collection of music, or maybe some music films, or maybe some movies. You don't just spend time listening to any piece of music in your collection. You probably have certain pieces of music that you really resonate with, and you spend most of your time listening to them. You probably spend the least amount of time listening to some pieces that you don't care about. They somehow made their way into your collection, but you don't really find them interesting to you. In other words, you don't resonate with. If you apply the same principle to people, you may notice that people who you resonate with are the ones who are likely to spend more time with. Why? Because you will feel better if you spend more time, just an extra minute, in the person's company that you resonate with. If you feel great spending an extra minute, maybe you will spend another minute or two. And it goes on, and time flies when you're having fun. In other words, you actually don't even notice how time disappears when you are in the company of a person who you're really resonating with. And of course, if you are in a person's company who makes you cringe, you probably can't wait to get out of there. So, the amount of time you spend being able to focus on something actually may give you a clue about the level of resonance with that particular object of perception or the energy being that you encounter. Now, it doesn't always mean that people spend their time focusing on things they resonate with. Unfortunately, quite on the contrary. Most people end up spending a lot of time focusing on things that they don't resonate with that much. As a matter of fact, you probably experienced some degree of worries in the past, or maybe concerns about the future. Perhaps you spend some time reminiscing about things that happened in the past that you wish didn't happen. Or perhaps you have certain concerns about the present moment. Again, focusing on those things that you wish would not happen. This is the perfect example of how we as humans often have tendency to focus on things that we don't really resonate with, but we become obsessed with them. We basically have tendency to worry about things we don't want to happen, or have certain regrets about things that happened in the past that we wish didn't happen. When we focus on things we don't resonate with, how does it make us feel? That's right. It makes us feel more tense. It makes us feel more resistant or reactive. In other words, we're going in a direction somewhere. There's always flow. If we are going in a direction where the flow is not flowing, how does it make you feel? Well, you actually have to spend a lot more effort to push in a direction where the flow is not going. If you're going directly against the flow, that's tremendously more energy as compared to what it takes to go with the flow. And so you can also say that all the habits of focusing attention on things that we don't resonate with are unconscious strategies for not being in the flow. Now, is there any solution to that? Well, of course. I wouldn't be teaching this masterclass if I didn't have a solution, right? And what is the solution? It's to actually change the habit. The solution lies in developing a new habit. The habit where you focus your attention mostly on things, on people, on events in your life that you do resonate with. When you do that, how does it affect you? Well, you become more relaxed. How does it make you feel energetically? You're not wasting energy. You're not pushing against the flow. How does it feel in terms of being at the right place at the right time? Well, that's by definition how you get to the right place. You actually find energy resonance with that place and go there. If you find energy dissonance, well, if you go there, you're going to find yourself in some other place other than where we would want to be if we want to experience that good luck. So essentially, luck is something that depends very much on our consciousness, on our energy awareness, and the ability to apply these principles of energy awareness to our movement so that we can actually get to where we want to be. That's right. How do you get to the right place so that you are there in the right time? You need to move there. Move either through the physical movement, get in the car, get in the plane, get there somehow. The simplest example of that is just simply walking. So you're not using any technology, you are just walking from point A to point B. And in that case, point B hopefully is the place that you particularly resonate with. How do we know that walking is done in a way that is also using the same methodology of energy awareness? We pay attention to each and every step that we take. If you take a step in a spot on Earth that you wish you didn't step in, that means you didn't pay attention to how you were walking. So each and every step is essentially an expression of being at the right place at the right time. That's right. We're not just hoping to get there sometime in the future, because once you get there, you realize, well, getting here actually is just a stepping stone to getting somewhere else. In other words, you don't want to get stuck even at the best place, because there's always more to the life journey. And each and every step that we take, we also assume that it is potentially the place where I would need to be right now at this particular moment in time. If I apply the same principle of energy awareness, I actually take each and every step I take on Earth as mindfully and consciously as humanly possible. Some people even say it's not humanly possible to pay attention to each and every step you take. And I dare you to learn how to do exactly that. I actually invite you to develop this level of mindfulness and presence of mind. When each and every step you take, you actually take it with some degree of awareness. Now, what does awareness do for you in that case? Well, in general, awareness is the ability to take whatever used to be unknown and make it known. So if you didn't know something, by paying attention to it, by becoming aware of it, you actually get to know it. Now, what are we particularly interested in is knowing ourselves. As you probably agree with me, and I hope you do, most spiritual traditions, spiritual paths, the teachings of different masters of the good old days, or even contemporary masters that are worth the salt, basically focused on self-knowledge. Knowing yourself is the holy grail of personal development. Knowing yourself is also what allows you to actually recognize energy resonance, because in order to assess how well you resonate with something, you need to know yourself so that you compare. It's not enough to just focus all your attention and energy elsewhere. It's also important to give yourself that or even greater level of attention. And where attention goes, energy flows. What happens when you pay attention to yourself? You actually create a massive circulation of energy within your own system. Now this is the macrocosmic orbit. This is the way to empower yourself. And you do this organically. You're not doing this in a contrived manner, trying to push energy according to certain meridians, according to certain protocols or formula. You actually experience this alchemical manifestation of power within your physical body by paying attention to yourself. That's right. That is exactly what happens when you start noticing each and every step that you're taking. You're paying attention to the way that you move. You also develop the sixth sense. The sixth sense is called awareness of movement, or kinesthesia. Kinesthetic awareness is something that we're all hardwired for. We all have kinesthetic proprioceptors throughout the body. But most people don't pay enough attention to kinesthesia. As a matter of fact, most people don't have this word in their vocabulary. So how much attention can they pay to it? When you don't pay attention to your sense of movement, it remains this obscure and mythical sixth sense, in addition to the other five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But when you observing things through sight, when you're listening to things through your hearing, when you're smelling things or even tasting things or touching things, all of this is happening in relation to objects of perception outside of yourself. I mean, you can probably listen to your own heartbeat, you can hear your stomach gurgling maybe, but in most cases, we are paying attention externally. And that means we are actually experiencing what is going on outside of ourselves. We are experiencing life secondhand. We are not noticing how life is actually happening within ourselves, within our organism, which would be experiencing life firsthand. How can you do that? Well, you need to develop the sense of movement. There is no life without movement, and therefore when you focus on movement, you actually start experiencing the flow of life directly. You're no longer looking at it, you're no longer listening to it or smelling it, you're actually experiencing it firsthand. You are experiencing life more fully, more directly. Now, that is a positive side effect of developing that ability to be mindful of your own movement. It's a great benefit, but it's not what we were looking for, because what we were looking for is the ability to pay attention to energy. Now, as we already talked about, everything's made of energy. So whatever you look at, whatever you hear, whatever you touch, however tangible things may appear, they all are made of energy, including your own physical body. Your own physical body is made of energy. And as you develop the ability to feel the movement and observe how the movement flows, you will notice how in some situations it's easier to move, and in some it's harder. When is it harder to move? When you're tense. When is it easier to move? When you're not so tense, when you're more relaxed. How do we ease our movement? We need to be more relaxed as we move. As a matter of fact, When we tense up, it makes it hard to move. That's why I often refer to tension as frozen movement. Now, when you defrost it, or it thaws out and starts to flow. And when your movement begins to flow and you pay attention to it, what do you pay attention? To the flow of energy that manifests through your physical movement. So this, my friend, is a direct experience of the flow of Qi. This is also a direct opportunity to pay attention to the flow so that you can be in the flow. Why would you want to be in the flow? Well, when you're in the flow, you experience the greater sense of wellness and well-being. You are more relaxed, therefore you are not causing yourself health issues by keeping certain energy blockages within your body that blocks the flow of Qi, the flow of blood, the flow of lymph. You have greater mobility. Because you are less tense, you are more flexible. And by the way, physical flexibility and mental flexibility often go hand in hand. So often people who are more flexible also experience greater physical flexibility and vice versa. So as you become less tense, you experience greater ability to move. You have greater availability to life. And that also translates in greater mental availability. You are actually capable of connecting with the deeper essence of things. Perceive things at their essential nature. You also can connect with people more deeply because you begin to understand them at a deeper level. You also connect with yourself at a deeper level and begin to understand yourself. And as you pay attention to yourself, you get to know yourself a great deal more. And as you know yourself more, and you develop a greater sense of ease in your movement, you will notice that there is a direct correlation between the greater ease, the greater sense of relaxation, and being at certain places, or meeting certain people, or doing certain things. Those are the things and people and places that you resonate with. So again, we made a full circle, didn't we? We completed this circle where we basically started. We started by hoping to find how to be at the right place at the right time. Now, this is actually not only teaching you how to be at the right place at the right time, experience good luck. It also teaches you how to facilitate greater sense of wellness and well-being in your physical body because you're more relaxed, you have easier breath. Instead of teaching you the certain breathing techniques and exercises, I would much rather help you release whatever holds your breath so that your breath can flow naturally. And what can be healthier than being natural? In other words, instead of contrived or artificial techniques, I would much rather help you unlearn certain things that you've been doing to yourself. Obviously, nobody has been stifling your breath. You've been doing it to yourself, of course, completely unconsciously. Nobody would do that consciously to themselves, right? But since it was unconscious, it means you couldn't do anything about it. You can't stop doing that which you're doing unconsciously because you don't know that you're doing it to yourself. Remember, awareness is the ability to bring whatever used to be unconscious or unknown to the light of consciousness. Once you get to know it, then you have a freedom of choice. You can choose whether to keep doing whatever you've been doing and essentially maintaining that level of tension or even more tension, or you can stop doing that. Do something else. That means you actually have the freedom of choice, and those people who experience greater sense of freedom often experience greater sense of happiness. So my friend, this is the direct route to manifesting greater happiness in your life. Now, if we know how to experience greater luck, greater happiness, greater wellness, connect with the right people, be at the right place in the right time, All we need to learn essentially is one more thing: how to do the right thing. And doing the right thing is not always as straightforward as finding the right place or even getting there at the right time. Because doing the right thing is very subjective. What's right for one person may not be right for another person, and vice versa. So when people say you should be doing this or you should be doing that, often you probably wonder, what do they know about me? And you're absolutely right. They don't know much about you, because nobody can pay as much attention to you and therefore know as much about you as you can. You can pay much more attention to yourself than anyone else. And by doing that, you can learn more about yourself than anyone can know about you. Now, if we are in agreement about this simple understanding, then we actually need to continue paying attention to ourselves so that we would know more about ourselves, so that we can choose the most appropriate course of action. Remember, course of action has something to do with the direction. We were talking about the flow and how you can pay attention to where the flow is going. If you recognize that course of action is also very much like that, so you can choose a certain course of action, but if it goes against the flow of things in the universe, you will probably be pushing the river upstream. If you recognize that everything is made of energy, then you also probably recognize that there is a certain flow to it. And when you pay attention to the flow of things, including your own flow, the flow of your own life, if you will, then you may begin to recognize that there are certain intersections, or there are certain points of confluence of this course of action of yours and the flow of things, the Tao. If you notice that those important points of intersection, those junctures, are actually the turning points in your life, then you may also recognize that noticing those points, those junctures, can be a crucial way to improve the quality of your life, because those are the turning points that will determine what's going to happen in your life afterwards. So we basically learn from water how to be conscious or how to be non-reactive. I think I mentioned in one of my previous videos, or perhaps in our last masterclass, I mentioned what it's like to go with the flow if you imagine a stream of water flowing down the slope. There may be some obstacles on the way, maybe a big boulder once in a while. If that stream runs into the boulder, it's not going to just stand there and beat the head against the wall trying to break through. Obviously, there's going to be some flow, some pressure on the boulder that water can apply. But if it's a really big one, the water is not going to move the boulder, at least not right away. It is not going to go straight through the boulder, trying to drill the hole through it. It will start eroding it. How does it erode the boulder? How does it erode the area around the boulder? Perhaps it will seep through cracks. Perhaps it will go under the boulder or over it, or most likely around. How will it find the way around the boulder? Well, it will go where it can flow the easiest. Since water follows the laws of nature, it flows where it's easiest for it. It will find a way around that boulder, and it will continue flowing further downstream, down the slope. If the water had consciousness and you asked it, so how did you overcome that huge obstacle in your way? What would it say? It probably would say, what obstacle? Oh, that boulder? That was not a problem. It was actually a turning point in my journey down the slope. So in other words, when we recognize that there is a certain dissonance if we continue going in a particular direction. We start feeling more tense, our movements become more stifled, our breathing becomes impeded. You essentially don't feel good. Now, what do? You start recognizing that at the very onset of this particular experience. You don't have to wait till you really hurt yourself or get sick. You become really aware that something is off. Let's pay attention and find a direction for a new course of action. The course of action that would be more congruent with the flow of things, with the Tao. Essentially, we're constantly watching out for any type of dissonance, but we're not getting obsessed about it. If we just get obsessed with the thing that stops our flow, we'll get stuck. We run into obstacles if we just focus on them. In order to navigate around them, we actually need to look for the areas where we can go. In other words, we look for the areas of greater resonance rather than dissonance. So if you're, for example, a skier, and you go down the slope and you see this boulder or a tree growing in the slope. If you just keep telling yourself, I don't want to run into that boulder, I don't want to run into that boulder, guess what's going to happen? Where attention goes, energy flows. Your energy is going to go straight towards that obstacle that you tell yourself you don't want to run into. The same also happens with things about the past. Often we keep reminding ourselves about certain things that happened in the past that we wish didn't happen, or we feel guilty, or we feel remorseful or angry about. The more we focus on those things that cause us this emotional turbulence, the more turbulence we experience in the present moment. So in other words, things that hurt us once actually continue to hurt us if we keep dwelling on the experiences of the past that we didn't resonate with. Now, did anything happen that you did resonate with? In other words, did anything happen that you were actually happy about, that you feel grateful for? If you focus your attention on those things, on things that you feel grateful for, the things that you were happy about when they occurred, or perhaps in retrospect you realized whatever challenge you experienced back then actually turned out okay. As a matter of fact, it made you stronger, it made you wiser, or somehow else better off. Perhaps it was a learning opportunity. That's right. It's an intelligent way to look at any challenge and recognize that it's actually a great opportunity to learn. For some people, it takes years or even decades to recognize that certain things that happened in the past were actually worth learning from. Has it ever happened to you? Anything that in the past, when it happened or soon thereafter, it felt like a terrible problem or a big setback. But perhaps in retrospect you learned to recognize that it was a fantastic learning opportunity for which you become grateful for. If there is something like that that happened in your life, use it as a role model. Basically, you already know how to recognize that something that appeared to be a problem actually is a great learning opportunity and a blessing in disguise. The more you recognize the blessing in disguise right away, or the shorter there is the time lapse between the experience and recognition of this experience as a lesson, the less time it's going to take to learn whatever there is to learn from it. If it takes you years, obviously you're not in a learning state of consciousness. You are in a problem solving or perhaps denial or trying to run away from problems or sort through so basically you are just constantly perceiving whatever is going on as a problem, and maybe as you grow older you will eventually recognize it as a learning opportunity and actually learn whatever there is to learn from it and benefit from it. But perhaps you don't have to take years, maybe just months. As a matter of fact, with practice you can snap into that learning state of consciousness a lot faster, maybe just in a matter of days. As a matter of fact, it's possible to do it even faster. What if you do it in a matter of hours instead of days? Now that would be pretty amazing. How about condensing the time lapse even to a smaller fraction of the time, for example, in a matter of minutes? What would it be like if you experience something and you don't dwell on it, you don't feel like you're struggling with it, a few minutes later, you actually start recognizing it as a learning opportunity, and you switch from the problem-solving state of consciousness to a learning state of consciousness. In other words, you're not perceiving this event as a problem, you're perceiving it as a lesson for which you already become grateful for. So, you literally don't spend much time. Now, if minute is too much, maybe you can condense into seconds. Maybe eventually a fraction of a second. Imagine what it's like to run into any obstacle in your life, into any challenge or a perceived problem, and immediately recognize it. It's really not a problem. It's actually a fantastic learning opportunity that I'm happy to encounter and learn from. And from this point on, I will start applying whatever lessons I learned from it to the rest of my life. Now, I have a lot to be grateful for suddenly. And that also means that it's possible to live life problems free. What would it be like to live your life problems free? It would be freaking amazing, wouldn't it? It would mean that you don't have any stress in your life. What would it be like to live stress-free? It would be pretty awesome. And it also means that you, again, have less tension in your body, less tension in your relationships, less struggle and strife. In other words, even if there are some crappy things happening, and we have plenty of crappy things happening all the time, instead of dwelling on them, we can actually learn how to recognize them as fantastic opportunities to learn and grow. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as they say. Well, you don't have to run into something that might kill you. Virtually anything can strengthen you and serve as an important opportunity for learning and growth. So that is essentially what we learn. We study how to quit struggling, how to stop focusing on things that we don't resonate with, and actually direct our course of action along the path that is much more harmonious, much more in resonance with our own energy. And the path of harmonious action begins with the first step. As they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And each subsequent step is also just as important as the first one. Why? Because only harmonious steps allow you to travel along the harmonious path. So in other words, you actually need to maintain that level of wherewithal, mindfulness, and presence of mind each and every time you take a step. So this is my invitation for you to develop the ability to take steps that really lead you along the harmonious path. The Tao is no joke. It's the path of life. It's the flow of things in the universe. If we go against the flow, we are guaranteed to struggle and suffer and perish very quickly. However, if we don't fight against the flow of life, if we actually move more in a fluid and a harmonious manner, then we experience greater harmony, freedom from stress, tension, and suffering. What else do? We develop the ability to move in the harmonious culture of movement. That's right. I don't just teach Qigong styles, I teach Qigong lifestyle. And one of the crucial elements of Qigong lifestyle is the ability to develop the culture movement that reflects all these principles that we already discussed. In other words, the difference between learning certain moves that you do when you practice Qigong and developing a culture of movement that is specific to Qigong masters is that you actually use that culture of movement each and every time you take a step on earth. Every move that you perform can be more harmonious or less harmonious. How do you know that the movement is more harmonious? Well, it feels great. It has greater efficacy. It takes less effort and energy to perform and yields better results. That's the definition of high performance, isn't it? So, again, we made the full circle. We are studying how to develop high performance by actually developing the culture movement that allows us to perform at peak pretty much every moment in our lives. We learn how to develop the harmonious culture movement by understanding that there are certain principles governing or facilitating this kind of culture movement. So instead of learning techniques or forms, we actually switch our attention and focus it on the essence of the practice. That's right. What's the essence of Qigong practice? As well as practice of similar disciplines, whether it's Tai Chi or Kung Fu or any other energy art, whether it's a healing art or perhaps a meditation practice. All of these have something in common. They all boil down to the same essence. We connect with the essence of things if we pay attention to it. We can actually recognize the energy that everything is made of, and we can relate to ourselves as energy beings, meaning we actually focus on our own inner essence. Now, in order to recognize that focus is the ability to pay attention to one thing at a time. That means that if you're paying attention to the forms, appearances, or other fluff on the surface, you actually cannot pay attention to the inner essence, because the ability to pay attention to one thing is the definition of focus. And if you are really interested in developing the ability to experience high performance, to be in the flow, to live your life in a more harmonious way, that would require developing the quality of attention that is unique to us practitioners of energy arts. We learn how to pay attention to the energy rather than appearances. But not all energy practitioners focus their attention on the inner essence. There are a lot of those who pay attention to the forms. Now, I don't teach forms. As a matter of fact, I find forms to be a distraction from really practicing energy arts. Why? Because they distract your attention. If you're doing a form, you probably are trying to perform it according to a certain protocol, a certain formula, or a certain pattern that was taught to you, or you learned somewhere from the book or from the video maybe. Instead of focusing on the form or the appearance, I invite you to develop the ability to pay attention to the inner essence of things, which is easy to do if you actually focus on movement, specifically on the culture of movement that you are engaged in. So that is another kind of roundabout way to explain why it's so important to pay attention to each and every step that you take on earth, and any movements that you make, any movements that you perform with your physical body are essentially also somewhere on the scale of harmony, how harmonious they are. More harmonious movements are usually the movements that are based on the principle of integration. You're using yourself fully. The less integral the movement is, the more it uses isolated motion of a particular part of the body that is not acting in concert with the rest of the body. In other words, I make an isolated movement, for example like this, it doesn't have any power. It doesn't have any connection to the rest of the organism. It's too isolated. And how do I isolate it? By tensing up. You cannot isolate something without tension. So what happens then? You actually create an energy blockage. That's why the hand will not have power if it is moving in an isolated manner. If it's moving in an integral manner, it's going to have power without using much force. Remember in our previous webinar, in our previous masterclass, we talked about the difference between power versus force. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We're learning how to become powerful instead of being forceful. And we apply this principle to all our movements. So our movements are powerful rather than forceful. How do you tell them apart? Which ones require more effort? For example, you want to lift something off the floor. If you bend over like this, and you lift it with an isolated motion of the torso bending over, or just lifting it like this, like isolated movement of the arm bent at the elbow, it's not going to have much power. As a matter of fact, that's how people hurt themselves. How many people experience lower back pain? Probably half of the population of America, probably half of the population of planet Earth. Now, not all parts of our planet, not all countries, not all cultures have the same culture movement. Different parts of the world have different cultures of movement. People in Japan move differently from people in Germany. People in South Africa move differently from people in North America. People in Polynesia move differently from people in England. So there is a distinction between different cultures. And I don't want to say that they're good or bad cultures, but some of them have greater integration than others. Just to give you one little example. In many parts of the world, especially the third world countries, both men and women, especially women probably, tend to carry things on their heads. What does it mean? It means that they actually have to maintain the alignment of their spine that supports not only the weight of the torso, the weight of the head, but also whatever they're carrying on top of the head. If the spine is out of alignment, for example, the neck is crooked like this, it's going to hurt. It's going to get broken with the weight of whatever they try to carry on their head, or at least it's going to be very dysfunctional. You're not going to get very far. So, what do people do? They inadvertently learn about alignment and gravity, using the bone structure of the body, which is a representation of the element of earth in the organism, to mitigate the gravity pull that is pulling us down, which is another manifestation of the element of earth energy. Gravity and alignment of the bones essentially cancel each other out, or essentially we feel like we're not struggling against gravity when we rest on the bone structure. Why? Because unlike muscles, bones don't have to work hard to perform their function. As a matter of fact, they don't burn any energy. They don't get tired. bones, if they're in alignment, can perform for quite a long time. They have massive endurance without getting tired. They don't get sore if they're being used because they're infinitely stronger than muscles. Maybe not infinitely, but they're a lot stronger. Muscles are never get strong as bones. And also what happens is that muscles, when they're being used for long enough, they burn a lot of energy. And then they get tired or tense and sore and create energy blockages, which wreak havoc in our health. As compared to the bones. If the bones are in alignment, muscles can relax because they're not really being used much. They can only kick in and start being used when they need to compensate for misalignment of the bone structure. So what happens when we live in a country, for example, where we carry things on top of our head, we learn how to use ourselves in a much more efficient and effective manner. We spend less energy struggling against gravity. Even when there is nothing on top of the head, the habit of maintaining this alignment still is in place, which means it is just better posture. Now, I'm not inviting you to move to a third world country and start carrying things on top of your head, although you're welcome to experiment. What I invite you to do is perhaps just imagine carrying something on top of your head. Just imagine maintaining this level of alignment so that you don't struggle against gravity. Now, you cannot achieve that by tensing up more. If you're tensing up more, you know that there is something off. In other words, your breathing is going to be stifled and you will be struggling with too much tension, maybe giving yourself high blood pressure. As a matter of fact, that's what we call hypertension. So instead of tensing up, you're actually learning how to relax. And as you're relaxing, you are going to experience greater sense of ease in your body, greater availability to the flow of life force. You will have less energy blockages, and also greater mobility, ability to move with gracefulness and precision and power. Of course, there are certain details that I will be happy to share with you more in our next masterclass that I invite you to attend next week. And until then, I wish you the best of luck with learning how to engender luck, being at the right place at the right time, just like we learned today. Until then, namaste. Bye-bye.